Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. Over the last 2 years, we've had the incredible privilege of interviewing wonderful people all across our industry. We don't have a media company behind us. We don't have corporate sponsorship. It's just us. If you find value in what we do, the best way to support our show is to like, comment on episodes on whatever streaming platform you're on, subscribe on YouTube, and because the whole point of the podcast is about community and building a community, tell your friends. Thanks. Enjoy the episode. Cheers there.
Cheers,
Welcome
man.
to the podcast.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I am really excited to talk to you. I've had one of these wines in the past, and I really enjoyed it. I think it was this Pinot, actually, but it might have been a different vintage. Mm-hmm. And it was really fun. We can talk about it a little bit. It had a different name, but it still had that really great kind of oceanic characteristic to it, which I think you've nailed it with the packaging. So the normal part of the pod, introduce yourself, kind of tell us your background. Just off camera, you mentioned 25 years in winemaking. So, you know, what was before that? What made you get into wine? What's your story?
Well, my name is Aaron Jackson, and I have my wineries in Paso, and I have a brand called Aaron and another brand called Akana. And so, 25 years. First vintage of my wines was 2002. Was my Petite Sirah, which we'll taste the 2022 Petite Sirah a little later on. But so a little bit of the foundation, the origins. You know, this is always a really fascinating question because I think as professionals in the industry, we hear a lot. People come from a wide variety of backgrounds, you know, and I think so many people enter the wine industry for different reasons or different experiences in their lives or what have you. You know, in Paso Robles these days, it's 80% of the people are well, I made a whole lot of money, and so you know that's kind of that's the nouveau
right
Paso Robles, right? And then I think on the SLO Coast, 30 minutes away over on the coast, you have a lot of people. A little bit less of that, and I think you have a lot of people that are entering the industry from different perspectives. Sometimes from maybe more the Sami world because people are kind of nerding out on those styles of wines and they're exciting. And so for myself, it's kind of a bit of a hometown story for me. I grew up in a little town that I still live in, which is called Cayucos. It's about 2,000 people. It's on the SLO Coast. North of San Luis Obispo, next to Morro Bay, south of kind of Cambria and San Simeon. So it's this little coastal hamlet. I grew up there my whole life, and there wasn't much to do other than surf and hang out and skate. And it's a great town to grow up in, and it's a great town to live in. I still love it. It's mostly empty homes now, so it's definitely like turned into like a vacation home spot that I think a lot of places in California have. But it's still a lovely place to live. And growing up there wasn't a lot of careers in the area, and I was passionate about the place that I grew up. I feel very lucky to have got to grow up in a place like that, to grow up in a place where people vacation. And so for me, it was trying to find opportunity, and I'm starting this at a very, very young age. This is like when I'm 14 years old. I have no family in wine. My parents certainly drink wine. My parents were very much middle class. They still to this day drink, I mean, there might be a box of Peterbella in the fridge at this moment, but usually it's my mom's like, "What's on sale at Costco?"
Right.
Yeah. It's usually Bogle Chardonnay or something like that, right? But
wine's wine at this point.
It was definitely like a turning leaf in kind of Peterbella household, Franzia household,
sure.
growing up. But so I wasn't drinking wine. I didn't have a grandfather that collected Burgundy or any of that shit. But I got a job when I was a sophomore in high school, planting a vineyard, actually in the SLO Coast, a small Pinot vineyard, 3 acres. And it was a vineyard that my older brother had a buddy that we worked with, and he used to work at Wild Horse, the infamous Wild Horse winery, now gone. But and so he got this gig planting this vineyard. And he asked me to come out and help him, and he's like, "Oh, you want to help me plant a vineyard?" And it was this sort of serendipitous story of like, you're 15. It's like, hey, you can drive around on a quad, and we'll pay you like $12 an hour cash.
Dig some holes.
And I'm like, yes. So here I am walking up hillsides, planting Pinot vines, installing drippers, like, hand-hoeing, what have you, And I love being outside, and I was like, this is great, man. And I got, not knowing much about wine at the time, I'm sort of asking, I am to this day a very, very curious person, ask a lot of questions. And so I was asking, like, tell me a little bit more about wine, and I want to understand wine. He's like, well, check it out. Like, we're gonna plant this vine, and the row orientation's like this, and we're planting, this clone. We're planting 115 over here on 1103 peat rootstock, and it's gonna grow. And it's gonna grow, and then a couple years down the line, we're gonna pick the fruit, first crop. We're gonna make wine out of it, and we're aging barrel. Like, I'm learning the basics of wine, right? But this concept of
it seems super in depth for most people's basics of wine, but
but I'm just learning. I'm a kid at
Sure,
this point.
sure,
I'm learning the basics of wine, but this concept in my mind, which was sort of seeing not just the supply chain, but like the chain of events of the pathway or the life cycle of a bottle of wine. I'm sort of protracting it in my mind as a young person and thinking to myself, okay, so I'm going to plant this guy's got me planting this vine in the ground. He's going to pick the fruit at some point in a couple of years. He's going to make wine out of it. It's going to get bottled at some point. And someday down the line, maybe it's 10 years from now, someone's going to pop the cork and crack that bottle of wine and pour it in the glass and taste it and say, oh yeah, this is a Pinot Noir from this site in this place, grown on this soil, and it's a 2000. This was in like 99, so it's like maybe the first crop would be 2001. It's a 2001 vintage, and it rained this much. And as a young person, I thought to myself, what? Oh my God, like nothing else in the world that we consume goes back to this level of detail. And I liken it to things like people like, we think about brands, like, I love like Patagonia, like everything they stand for, it's great. It's like, oh yeah, I love their down jackets. Like, well, where do they get the down for the feathers? What kind of geese are those? Like, well, I don't know.
Where's the product made?
Yeah, someone goes, oh my God, I have a Neiman Ranch ribeye on the list tonight. Oh, I love Neiman Ranch. And they go, oh yeah, where's Neiman Ranch? And they go, I don't know. What kind of cows do they raise? I don't know. What do they eat? What do the cows eat? They go, I don't know. I just know that Neiman Ranch is good.
Right.
So here we have something that's there's a through line from the moment, God knows when it would be, from that point that someone consumes that bottle of wine. There's this through line all the way back to this point of me, a 15-year-old kid, putting a vine and digging a hole in the dirt and putting a vine in the ground. That, as a young person, made my brain explode. And I thought, this is something that's different. This is something that I can get behind. This is something that's magical. This is something that's innately, in some ways, maybe more human than most other things that we consume. And it kind of drove me down the rabbit hole of falling in love with wine and deciding pretty much then and there that I think this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that was, getting close to 30 years ago. So it's been quite a journey. And I'm still a young guy, but it's been pretty cool to fall in love with something at a young age like that.
I don't know many other people that have that, not at least in the United States. There's people that I've talked to that started going to winemaking school at 14 or 16 or whatever, and then that's become their life because obviously alcohol is not vilified as much as it is in American culture. Mm-hmm. But that's so at 14, you decide this is kind of what you want to do. You want to drive forward with this. Do you just pick up like summer jobs? You plant more vineyards? I mean, just like, what was your angle in? Like, how do you keep that ball rolling while also still going to school and everything?
Yeah. So I started kind of hanging around, just sort of driving, once I got my driver's license, I was kind of driving over to Paso and kind of hanging out with my brother's friend and some other people and just sort of being that annoying, curious young. And this was at a time, this is in the at the end of the 90s, very early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And so, it's 2001, and a kid showing up at your doorstep that's curious about wine. It was a different world then, and Paso Robles was
completely different.
And you could say it was in its infancy, even though it had been around since like the late 1800s.
Sure.
Still making wine, but on a realistic commercial scale. It was really entering. It was just kind of the first expansive wave of things happening in Paso Robles. And so I'm showing up and rocking up at people's doors and being like, hey, I'm curious about this. Can I hang out? Can I help you wash barrels? And it was a very accepting place, and I think that people were just fired up to see someone that was young, that was interested in this. So I started doing this and hanging around wineries. I didn't really get any other jobs outside that vineyard until right when I graduated high school. I mean, when I walked down the aisle in high school graduation, they said that Aaron Jackson wants to be a winemaker, and I'm a kid. You say a lot of things when you're young about what you want to be when you grow up. And so there was a degree of naivety there, but to some sense there's a degree of luck. That's what I chose, and I happen to still love it. So it was a stroke of luck for me. But I was hanging around winemakers. I started working in a winery, and I was high school at 17, started working in a winery straight away. And then I started going to Cal Poly. I applied to Cal Poly. It was the only school I applied to. Started studying winemaking and viticulture and ag business as well when I was there. And then by my sophomore year, I had worked at a couple vintages at that point because I started really, really young. And I said, I want to make my own. I was dreamed of always making my own wines for whatever reason. Once I entered it, once the fire was lit, I thought I want to make my own wines, and I was, I had this kind of like somewhat of a rebel attitude. Not like I was a rebel as an individual, really, but I don't know. Maybe it was just like growing up as a surfer. We're inherently live at a troublemakers, and I was also the younger brother. My older brother's 4 years older than me, and so I had this little bit of that like younger brother syndrome, like
sure.
Live in the shadow of someone else. You're like, I'm gonna pave my own path here, do my own thing, So I had this kind of this idea to create something for myself to stand out, and that's probably something I recognize more as an adult now. And so my sophomore year, I'm gonna start making my own wines. So I was working at an oyster bar in Cambria called the Sea Chest, and this was summer of 02, and saved up all my tip money that summer. I had about $1,000 I'd saved at the end of the summer, and that harvest came in. I was working at the same winery I worked at the year before, and I said, I'm going to make my own wines this year. And so I decided I'm just going to go for it. And back then you could buy grapes for $1,000 a ton.
Especially Petite Sirah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I bought my first ton of Petite Sirah for $900 a ton.
Wow.
Which irony is about what Petite Sirah goes for this year. In this market. No, but so bought some Petite Sirah for $900 a ton, and got a couple of 3 old Nutribels from a buddy of mine, and I was working for my friend's father who had a funky little winery in an old dairy barn, and he's like, yeah, you can make it here for free, and off we went, and I did it legit and straight. I mean, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I did it legit and did all my paperwork and went commercial with the first vintage. And looking back, it was actually a pretty decent wine.
Do you ever get a chance to retaste those wines? Do you have any?
I have one bottle left that I have now refused to open.
Yeah.
The last bottle that I opened a couple of years ago was kind of on its last legs.
Sure.
The irony is the next year, 2003, I switched vineyards to an old vine vineyard out in Shandon, kind of near where people might know the Shell Creek Vineyard, because there's some Chenin and some kind of cool old stuff out there of Aldegay. It wasn't the Shell Creek Vineyard, but it was next to the Shell Creek Vineyard out there in Shandon. And I switched there in 03, and man, those wines are banging still. So that's pretty cool. So obviously there's a lot to say about the vineyard sourcing. So I started off, and I released my first wine, 2002 vintage. I think I didn't release it until 2005. I just waited till I turned 21, and I went ahead and released my first vintage.
Sure.
Get all my paperwork.
So you could actually go taste it in the
accounts.
accounts.
And release it and sell it.
Sure.
Get my damn paperwork done.
Yeah.
You're trying to file an ABC and TTB permit. As a 19-year-old, they're like, The irony of this story is I actually got issued my permits from the TTB and the ABC. And I get fingerprinted and background check and everything. They issued me my permits before I was even 21.
That's so funny.
So I don't know if that was like a slip up of the government or what, but they're just like, well, I don't know. They had my birthday on it, but
well, you're a manufacturer at that point. It's not a bar. It's not a nightclub,
Yeah. And so, started with Petite Sirah. And going back to the 2002 vintage, I made Petite Sirah. And people are probably like, why on earth would you choose Petite Sirah of all things?
As your first wine.
As my first wine. And honestly, the foundation of my brand to this day, it's still the Aaron brand's, not Akana, but the Aaron brand is focused on Petite Sirah. And there was a lot of reasons behind that. There was a little bit of, I'm not going to say it was like some stroke of genius, because I think if anyone was in their right mind about business, they wouldn't choose a variety like Petite Sirah to be their focus. They would probably choose something like Cabernet or something like that. But for me, it was, this desire to want to do something left of center. As a very young winemaker, knowing that I was going to be out selling my wines at 21 years old, I would imagine I was going to be expected to get the door slammed in my face on a daily basis. And so walking into these first accounts and saying, hey, here I am, my name's Aaron, I'd like you to try my wine. It's like, go take a hike. But first, what do you've got? I got Petite Sirah. People go, oh, well, I don't actually have a Petite Sirah on the menu right now. Why don't you come on and inform me? And this is back when you could cold call people, right?
Sure.
Which doesn't really happen anymore.
It's a lot harder.
Yeah, as someone who's been a buyer and a salesperson yourself, you would know that. So it gave me this entry point into places that I otherwise would not have access to. And that really, it opened doors for me. And so it was, and there wasn't strictly a business decision. I make it sound like it was partly it was, how can I get in front of people? I enjoyed Petite Sirah. I was at that point in 2002. I was working for a winery, and we made some Petite Sirah that was really cool. It was old vine Petite Sirah, and I thought this is one of the most interesting wines in the cellar because we were making a lot of Zinfandel. We were making some cool Rhones as well, which were also very interesting. But Petite Sirah to me stuck out as being a unique wine in the cellar. I was fascinated how dark and intense it was. And we were also, knowing the other Petite Sirahs that I had tried, I had the versions that a lot of us don't enjoy, which are these big, clunky, square wines.
Oak to shit.
Oak to shit, American oak to shit, very angular, big boxes with hollow middles, and nothing but hard edges in those wines. We weren't making wines like that at this winery. We were making the old vine character of what we're making. And I think Paso specifically, which does produce lush wines with relatively soft tannins compared to, say, the Napa Valley or the Dry Creek Valley, where the Petite Sirahs can get very, very hard and very angular, and same in Napa Valley as well. We were producing wines that were quite rich, but had good acidity and a softer, big wines, but with a softer tannin profile. They intrigued me, and as I delved deeper into it, I thought to myself, well, every example of a Petite Sirah that I taste is a California example. And I thought to myself, I'm making all these other wines, and as I really started to fall in love with this variety in a way that it captivated my interest, is because, think about it. I mean, there's no international benchmark.
Not really.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Every other grape that we make literally has a benchmark. I mean, I'm trying to think. I guess you could go with like a hybrid or something weird like that. Zinfandel's maybe in a gray area.
With Primitivo.
A little bit, not the Croatian wines come around very much, but maybe, yeah. But there really isn't an international benchmark. And to me, as a winemaker, that just blew the doors open on, well, then every wine that you make kind of becomes part of writing that story. I saw it as an opportunity. I saw that as something that the wine world, I mean, if we're going to just be real with ourselves for a second, we're all just trying to sort of copy one another, more or less. I mean, every winemaker that I know
seeking inspiration
is looking for inspiration. You go to their house and they start cracking bottles and they say, hey, these days it's like, try this Arbois or something like that, and I want to make Pulsar like this. It's something like that. It's like, okay, whatever. You know, obviously, like, everyone's chasing Burgundy. You know, everyone's trying to make Cornas. That's the whole deal. Like, and so everyone's just it's like you're spending your whole life trying to be somebody else. And I started this conversation saying I had this little this chip on my shoulder of being a younger brother, and being like, you grew up living in the shadow of your older brother. And the last thing you want to do is spend your whole life trying to be somebody else. And so this was my way of paving my own path. So that's why it says, like, on the back of the bottle, like, boundaries are few on the road less traveled. It sounds cliche, right? But in a way, it was like I didn't want to travel the road that had already been traveled and just follow along. And I felt like and now going back now when we go to the Akana label, of course, like, do I find inspiration in making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from other producers? Hell yeah, I do. And that's a whole different side of winemaking that's enjoyable, is being inspired. You can see why people do that, is because it's inspiring to try other wines and seek to, maybe not replicate is the same word, but maybe make something that has it's like saying, if you listen to music and someone's listening to your band, they say, oh God, you guys have a little tinge of this or a little bit of tinge of that. It's like, oh, like, you could say that as like see it as an insult or see it as a compliment. Like, wow, that's like, and that's the band we're really inspired by. Like, we do kind of want to sound like this or sound like that. That's like what we're going for, but with our own sound. So that's a really different approach. But where I think doing Petite Sirah is like, you're really venturing into a lot more of an uncharted territory. And so it's a big challenge because you're kind of flying blind. You don't have this anchor point of someone telling you, like, oh, I'm working hard every vintage, but I'm just still not there because when I taste my wine against so-and-so's wine, I'm so far off the mark still. I don't have a lot of marks to go for. And frankly, some of those marks that are there as benchmark wines for the variety of Petite Sirah are wines that I actually don't really like very much.
Sure.
And maybe they're benchmarks because they've been doing it for a long time, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's like what the benchmark for the variety can or should be. That makes sense.
That totally makes sense. No, I think it's well said. I mean, the path less traveled and kind of not wanting to follow in someone else's footsteps, but also too, I think that this goes back to a little bit of your story as well, which was that you're proud of where you came from,
for sure,
and you loved where you came from, and you still live there, and you still see value in it. And you know, I think that, not that it's Paso, it's close, but giving some form of identity to it, right? Because now you have Cabernet and you have Zinfandel dominating the market in that region. But there are other producers like L'Aventure who are making red blends and things like that. But there's not really if you were going to create let's say a DOCG for the region, you know, what would be the grape that they would grow? Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't think it was Petite Sirah, but it would make a fascinating example.
Yeah, and I truly believe that today, I mean, I think we search the world. If we look at any other variety that we use, we search the world trying to find places where we feel like that's the sweet spot for those varieties. And having spent, at this point, better part of a quarter century working with Petite Sirah may be my focus. I truly believe that I think that Petite Sirah, I think the sweet spot is in Paso Robles for a number of reasons that we can go into later. But I do think, and I've talked to other winemakers about this, I mean, there's some limitations in Petite Sirah for sure. I mean, I definitely explored those limits of what doesn't work for the variety in the region, and some of it is actually the things that we admire about Paso, which is a 40-degree pure white, pure limestone hillside that's just in the blazing sun, which is great for Grenache, and some varieties like that are really tough. It's horrible for Petite Sirah, but I think it is in a sweet spot. And so focusing the Aaron brand on Petite Sirah, and then with the different blends that we make, we'll try one of them today. But it was then taking a step further is like, okay, we got this sort of varietal focus, so to speak, and then really branching out and experimenting with how Petite Sirah kind of plays nice with other varietals. And that's very much that global perspective, right? We have the opportunity to do in the new world, which is like, we can blend it with whatever the hell we want. This isn't France. We're not limited by like, oh no, you can only blend Petite Sirah with these 3 varietals.
Right.
It's like, we do whatever the hell we want. And that is another tool, another avenue for us to further learn about this variety, is learn like, let's look at its strengths and weaknesses, and let's see where other varieties work and bring more dimension to the grape. And we've been doing that with all varietals forever. And that's where a lot of Europe stands today. And I think that we have a little bit of a narrow-minded point of view because, I don't blend anything in my Pinot Noir. It's just Pinot Noir. But like, how many Pinot Noir blends do we see out there? It's sacrilege. And I tell people like,
unless it's sparkling wine.
And people blend anything with any other variety. They'll blend anything in Cabernet or whatever, like Syrah's like wide open, like put all kinds of stuff in it. But it's like, it's Pinot. Oh no, it's Pinot. You can't touch that. That's
Pinots
sacred.
And Chards are basically bulletproof in that sense.
Like, sacred. I was like trying a great wine the other day from Turlano up in Alto Adige, and they're putting Pinot Blanc and they're putting Chardonnay and they're putting Sauvignon Blanc together. I'm like, these wines are awesome.
Yeah.
Like, God, they're like not afraid to just go for it, and do cool stuff, But here it's like, no, Chardonnay and Pinot, they're sacred. You can't mess with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. I think one of the only wines that comes to mind was when I was first working at like a fine dine restaurant, Rudy and Paco's in Galveston. There was Flowers was doing the perennial blend.
Yes.
And it was like Chard Pinot and a little Meunier as like a still red wine. And it blew my fucking mind.
Yeah.
And I think it was like 70 Pinot, 28 Chard, 2 Meunier, or Pinot Meunier at the time.
Only a Sam would remember that blend too. That was your job, to recite the back label.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, you're right. And then I'm also trying to rack my brain with other examples of Petite Sirah, and really the only ones that come to mind is like Stag's Leap was the quintessential one for a long time. It was the Petite Sirah and the Viognier specifically were, if you were going to build a wine program, those were the ones that you put on your list because those are the ones that would sell. Yeah. And then you had a wine that was popularized obviously in Lodi, but the Petite from Michael David Winery, which was Petite Sirah, Petite Verdot blended, which I think was like 85-15 or 60-40 or whatever the blend was. But other than that, I mean, I can't really think of any other.
You have like the old Ridge York Creeks.
Oh, right.
Which
yeah.
would be like
yeah.
a wine that like certain somms would dig up. 70s, Ridge York Creek, Spring Mountain. Those wines, in my recollection of those that I've had, were like the kind of classic, like pretty square wines. Pretty like gnarly, pretty gnarly tannins, pretty boxy. I do still believe that Turley Hayne is a very benchmark Petite Sirah. We put that wine in a million blind tastings, and it is a very, very strong example.
I used to sell those wines. I feel bad.
It is a strong example.
But they did have like 40 wines, so
yeah. It's hard. They make so many Petite Sirahs, and I get lost in them. And so I think for the style, that's a wine that I can say is pretty cool. But one of the sad things today is you're seeing less and less Petite Sirahs, some like the iconic old vine Napa Valley vineyards. That I do think made some really, really great examples of the variety. A lot of those are disappearing. And I was talking to another buyer the other day about this, and it makes sense in theory. And I believe this theory is probably true, which is that the price of Napa fruit has gone up so much. It's the margins. The cost of goods sold. The cost of goods sold goes so high that these guys, there's no way for them to compete. And so what they've done is they've gone and found vineyards where they can essentially buy grapes in the Napa Valley at a lower price point, a la Petite Sirah, that is frankly probably benefiting their wines in a lot of ways as far as adding fruit, certainly color and structure, of course, but also a fruit, dark fruit profile, that kind of dense,
which is what the international clientele are seeking when they're finding those wines.
That dense kind of blackberry that you get, and Petite Sirah has a luscious fruit profile, and so they've chewed up all those Petite Sirahs, and rather than us seeing Napa Valley Petite Sirahs anymore, they've all just disappeared amongst Cabernets. And that was always happening.
Sure.
But it's happening. People are taking like the really great old vine vineyards that deservedly should be single vineyard examples of 100-year-old vine, amazing California, for what we talk about benchmark.
Yeah.
They're disappearing because they're getting buried into various things.
Into 1 or 2% of a blend of a wine that does.
I think 1 or 2% is probably
a million cases a year or whatever.
Yeah. Or I think even less than that. I think they're actually disappearing into some relatively iconic wines at higher percentages that you're not seeing. I think they're probably ending up in the 10-15% realm of some of these blends, so they can still hit varietal, and that only helps their bottom line, right? Because if it's $15,000 for a ton, and they can go to the grower and say, hey, you were getting 6 for your petite, I could pay you like 9.
Yeah.
And I'm
still cheaper than
still winning. So I think you're seeing that happen realistically a lot more.
Sure.
And then by nature, so what's happened is any of the great examples of Napa Petite Sirahs, they're buying, stuff from Pope Valley that's really heavily cropped, that they're really getting a high margin on, and those examples are becoming kind of inferior examples.
Sure.
I mean, I don't think that some of the iconic Napa Valley Petite Sirahs today are as iconic anymore, because I just don't think that they, what's going on in the bottle is not what it used to be.
To get into a really nerdy question, what is overcropped for a vineyard of Petite Sirah?
I mean, it really depends on a lot of things. I mean, I think in the valley floor of Napa Valley, I know Robert Bialy, which I think is a great producer, and they make a wonderful Petite Sirah called Royal Punishers, and it's all from Rutherford. It's from, I can't remember the name of the ranch, but I know they unabashedly say they farm it at 6 tons an acre.
Yeah.
It's valley floor. I think it's probably divided canopy.
Sure.
But that's what they're getting on cab. And so, and I think it's not a big, super structured Petite Sirah. It's got a little bit more red fruit, which tends to come out a little bit when you crop it up a little bit. But there's an accessibility there, and there's a fruit profile there. And honestly, I think it's a solid petite every year at a high tonnage. And maybe that's the reason they can make it, and produce it, and not have the grower, yank it out and just plant cab to it.
Right. Yeah.
Because they get 6 tons an acre or whatever. But for me, I mean, we don't have anything. I don't even think we've hit 4 on anything of ours. 3s is fine for us.
Yeah.
I mean, it needs to be economical for the grower as well. We have some sites that are in the 2s. Petite Sirah is an interesting wine. I think crop load wise, I think people generally associate it with, I mean, historically people say, oh, it's got to be, it's just for tannin color. That's all it's used for. It's a blender grape, and that's like playing into its the obvious elements of the grape, but you're sort of leveraging that more. If you overcrop it and the tannins never really ripen on the vine because it's overcropped,
right.
you're going to get really aggressive, really freaking angular, really dried out tannins. And you're probably still going to have color. And so in that case, like, that's what it can be. But if you want it to be what I call a complete wine, it's round, it's textural, it kind of hits all the elements, you can't crop it that high.
Right.
It doesn't work. And it's like I go back to go drink a Cabernet from the 80s or Napa Valley. What were they like? Well, they were pretty hollow, and they were pretty square, and they were really tannic. It's like, what were they doing? Well, they were cropping the shit out of it.
Yeah.
They were picking it at the wrong time. They weren't laying the tannins, polymerized on the vine. They were carrying too heavy of a load to get the tannins fully ripe. They probably weren't picking the grapes necessarily ripe enough.
Right.
Certainly, if they were overcropping it and they were still picking them super early, they were ending up with really green tannins, really green flavors, not much mid palate, not much texture. Those wines weren't that pleasant to drink. And
that's why they're still alive today.
Correct. And people say, oh, well, just don't touch it for 30 years. Like, do we really always want to be making wines that are terrible for the first decade? No. And then Petite Sirah, I've had some of those old Petite Sirahs that at 10 years and the fruit's kind of fading and you're kind of going into secondary and you're losing the generosity of some of the, not that the wine has to be all fruit, but like, we all like a little bit of fruit in our wine. It's one of the things that we enjoy, something that's made from fruit.
Something that's pleasant to drink is never bad.
Yeah. And so it's like, hey, we've lost some of the primary characters of this wine that make it pleasant to drink, but it's still a tannic beast. So now we have a kind of dried out tannic sort of just too savory wine that's just really angular. And there's wines that exist other places in the world that are like that. And that's kind of like, I've had some old Riojas that are still so freaking tannic and they're so secondary. And you're like, I get why I may be a Sommelier nerd on this, but like it's a bit masochistic. I don't really think this is a good wine to drink. Like, I'm not really understanding this. I do Sagrantinos that are like, oh man, I don't know, like who drinks this?
Sagrantino's one for me that's just like coffin nails. Yeah. It's like if it's not a decade plus old, I won't even think about trying it. Yeah. And I love it, and I love older Sagrantino. I think it's an incredible wine. But I would never drink one in its youth. Yeah. There was one that I was selling at Chambers Antonelli that had the Sagrantino Contrario, which was contrarian, and they made it in a lighter, brighter style that was really cool. But that's the only one that I've had in youth that was palatable for the most part.
And there's people in the Petite Sirah realm that have tried to swing the pendulum and make wines that are counter to what the grape naturally wants to be. And that could be cool. That could be a cool expression of it, but let's not take away from like what it wants to be. I'm not saying it wants to be this huge tannic beast. That's frankly those are some of the worst examples of the variety. But it's trying to sort of finesse the nuances of the variety, or the inherent sort of beastliness of the variety, and finesse it in a way that's still going to be this is Paso Robles. They're big rich wines. But I think if we think at it from the perspective of harnessing something that truly, as I believe, is distinctively Californian grape. Truly, that's something that talking about being like a local boy from California. That's another reason why I fell in love with the variety. It's one of the few varieties that we can say is at this stage it has French roots, but where is it in France?
Yeah,
it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's a truly Californian variety at this point, and there's something inspiring about that. You can almost say that about Zinfandel. Frankly, I'm not a Zinfandel drinker, but in a way, I think that's one of the reasons why people have been so passionate about it. I think it's actually why Somms are kind of returning to the variety in a way, is because it's got this history, right? Yeah, and it's this history that's distinctively Californian. And so I've heard this around lately that like people in the industry are like nerding on Zinfandel again, and I'm like, I couldn't believe it. And I was like, really? Yeah. Like of all the varieties out there, Zin is the one that, but like for good reason. There's all these great historical examples. Yeah. So if we're nerding out on something today, and maybe it harkens back to what we're talking about, which is benchmark. If people take comfort in having a benchmark to relate back to, it gives them like it's a validation point. And it's a way to, I think if you're like a newer winemaker, or you're inspired by something, everyone's looking for inspiration. So they go, oh my God, I never thought about Zinfandel, but I had a 1978 something Zinfandel from so-and-so. And it blew my mind. I couldn't believe how well it like held on, and how and the nuances and what it retained and what it didn't retain. And it became an inspiration wine. And I decided I wanted to make Zinfandel again. And so it's serving as that. So I guess in a lot of ways it makes sense. maybe those aren't happening with some old Petite Sirahs. I don't know.
Sure,
Someone's not opening like a 69 Concanon and being like, oh man, I want to, you know. Although I've had some of those old wines out of like 3 liters.
Yeah.
And maybe pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Like old Livermore freaking Petite Sirah.
Yeah.
It's like in a big enough bottle. It's like, dude, wow.
Yeah.
Like, unbelievable. I mean, but anyway, it's there's part of me that loves this kind of the Californianness of what Petite Sirah is, and this opportunity to be part of writing that story. I don't want to say like to be part of being the benchmark, because that sounds a little too wanky for me.
Right.
I think the term legacy is one of the most overused words in the wine industry, and it makes me want to jump off a bridge because I think there's enough narcissism in the industry.
Sure, yeah.
And so everyone's talking about their legacy, and it's like, you know what? I don't have any kids, so this is it.
Yeah.
This is there's no legacy after this. So, but yeah, I enjoy the variety. I enjoy its history here in California. I enjoy its uniqueness as not having that benchmark. I see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow, and for me as someone that fell in love with this industry, because it gave me an opportunity to never stop learning. I mean, obviously, like the pool of wine is both very wide and very deep. And so I feel as though this is a great Petite Sirah, sort of my vessel to navigate the world of wine, and I'm enjoying it.
Well, I think that, I mean, that's one of the things that seems to draw people in the most in wine, is that like inherent curiosity. And you mentioned that as a kid, like being curious, and even today, and asking questions and like wanting to learn. I mean, there's a lot of topics that you can get into that you can reach the bottom, but I don't think it's quite possible with wine, especially considering that every new vintage is a completely different thing, right? It's not like you're looking at a stagnant, statistic that this vineyard always hits this, rainfall is always this. I mean, that's wildly chaotic. I hesitate to use the word science, more of an art. It's incredibly chaotic. I think another thing that kind of is with Petite Sirah, and maybe with Zinfandel now catching its own tail, is that lack of typicity, or like we've talked about already. Petite Sirah, there's many different styles. Some are not quite as pleasant, and some are more pleasant. And as a consumer, I'm sure it can be very intimidating to want to go out into the marketplace and buy a $50 bottle off the shelf if you had no idea what it's going to taste like.
For sure. That's been the downfall of Syrah, for example.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a chameleon,
We all fucking love that wine. I don't know anybody that doesn't love Syrah.
But it's not predictable.
Yeah.
You grab something, you grab a Sonoma Coast Syrah, and then you grab a, Shiraz, the next thing, and you're like, I'm very confused.
And then the Australians are doing sparkling Syrah.
Correct. Yeah. It's not a reliable choice, and it's not a variety for the uneducated.
Right. Exactly.
That sounds really pretentious. So I wish I could walk that one back a little bit. But what I meant by it is not to sound like a pretentious asshole. I just mean that from a consumer standpoint, you kind of do need to sort of know what you're buying.
Right. Exactly. Or understand a style or something that can be compared, or have a high tolerance for pain, in the sense of like, I'm willing to spend $50 on a bottle that I don't know that I'm going to like. Yeah. And then you try it, you like it, you're like, I really like Crozer. I really like Cornos. What do you have that's like Cornos? And then you have to seek out the places where somebody can kind of hold your hand into that wading water, and kind of get you to where you need to go.
Well, Petite Sirah in that realm, like it does, I mean, to speak to, I guess it's one of its strengths, it does have a relatively reliable profile in some ways. I mean, we discussed it's the ends of the spectrum, and maybe where it's not, where if it's, it can be just really brutally tannic. I don't think that we're seeing as many of those examples in the market anymore. Right. Those just unbelievably tannic, just black as night and nothing but mouth. I mean, they're around.
Yeah.
But if anything, we're seeing a little bit too much on the other end of the spectrum, which is these really sort of flaccid, overripe styles that are grown probably in the northern part of the Central Valley,
right?
Or people that are picking it too ripe and they're smothering it in American oak. I wish people would just, the American oak thing, man. It's like you're putting something that I think is not bringing out. And other winemakers would totally disagree with me on this. Probably winemakers that are.
That's the beauty of wine.
Yeah, if I was sitting here with Paul Draper, he'd probably punch me in the face. But yeah, I don't think it really does the variety much favors, frankly. And so, yeah, we're seeing examples that are a little bit more in the kind of overripe, overcropped, red-fruited spectrum, slathered in American oak, and that's a shame.
Right.
But it does have a generosity in fruit that is something that I think that we all enjoy. I mean, I love drinking Grenache.
Right.
I mean, why do we love Grenache? Why, when someone brings when you go to a restaurant and you see and you don't like the wine list, but they have Côte d'Or on the menu, it's like, I will get that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly.
Go for the Côte d'Or. Thank you. And why Zinfandel in a lot of ways? I mean, Zinfandel's a very fruit-driven variety. Sometimes that's the thing that detracts me from the variety is I don't really care much for its particular fruit profile.
Right.
If it's pretty red fruited, but I don't know. There's something about it. The brambliness of it sometimes throws me off. Not in all examples. Some of them are beautiful, but there's a fruit profile in Petite Sirah that creates a reliability, and in comparing it to its parentage with Syrah, that's something in where like it has maybe in some senses a benefit over Syrah is that it has more fruit generosity than Syrah.
Right.
We love Syrah for all its feralness and
meaty, gamey,
all those characters,
olive
just a
tamponade
cerebral,
kind of vibe,
and all of the crazy expressions that it can have when you try this, a wall of rocks just Syrah. You're like, this, I don't know where to go with this wine. This is so weird. This tastes so. This is like licking a salt rock and and pouring road tar in my mouth. You know? But versus like going in the other ends of the spectrum. But Petite Sirah does have a reliability there, something we can expect, and I think the fruit profile is really enjoyable. Frankly, I mean, it's unabashedly a big wine.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of Psalms listen to this podcast, and I don't think I truly believe in the industry today. Unfortunately, Petite Sirah is not the variety that Psalms are recommending.
But they're not recommending Cabernet Sauvignon much anymore these days either, right?
Right. And so these aren't the wines because there's a general aversion to these days to sort of wines of weight, unless it's like European.
Sure.
Then it's like then you get a hall pass.
Right.
It's like but I mean it's this. It's like Sagrantino is more likely to end up on a list, than a Petite Sirah.
Yeah.
It's like why it's like it's a Sagrantino.
Well, I'm an Italian focused list. I have to have a Sagrantino.
Yeah. So anyway. We go on about that, but it's been a fun. It's been 25 years thus far. It's been a great project to focus on something that I think has great history in California, something that has a lot of potential. I think we're still just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
We don't have centuries of growing this grape with examples, which we clearly do with a large amount of other varieties.
Even Zinfandel 100-plus-year-old vines. I mean, at least there's that.
Yeah. And we're still learning kind of where what blends with it, how it works in blends, just the same way that people have really explored and dove deep into what varieties really complement Zinfandel. Bedrock's a great example. Bedrock has done amazing work and just really understanding, and the someday Morgan will write a tome of the things that he has learned from different vineyards, and a lot of it is not just the sites themselves, but also some of the other varieties that are planted within those sites. Rich has done a great job of that,
right?
As well, and learning those things. And I think we're just scratching the surface of that with Petite Sirah as well. And so, like Turley makes one wine, which is the Library Vineyard, which I think is up in St. Helena. And the Library Vineyard Petite Sirah is an old vine Petite Sirah vineyard, but it's a field blend, just like a lot of old Sonoma vineyards and old Napa vineyards that are frankly all gone. But the joke is like it's a Petite Sirah, but like it probably doesn't even meet varietal spec.
Sure.
It's probably like 70% Petite Sirah.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of other random shit in there, And that wine tends to be a little bit lighter in texture than some of the other Petite Sirahs that Turley makes. But there's a lot of nuance there. It's kind of interesting. It's not always my favorite wine that comes from them, but there's a lot of cool things going on in that wine because there's probably old Carignan, there's definitely old Mataro, there's some other random shit in there, there's probably Alicante or something weird.
Right.
There's probably some Zin.
Yeah.
There's probably a couple of weird whites. There's probably a few Palomino or like who knows what else.
Throw it all in.
Yeah. So, there's something to be said about that.
I want to ask you a question, and maybe this is a hot button. So obviously, if it's too traumatizing, you don't have to answer it. In the 26 years of winemaking that you have now in the region, but also growing up in the neighborhood, how have you seen this Nouveau Paso kind of change the landscape? Do you think it's for the better or for the worse? In a way, you would assume it's bringing attention to the region, good, but you'd also assume that it's bringing corporate money, which is buying out small farms and small farmers, bad. Where do you kind of fall on that spectrum?
I mean, you pretty much answered the question. It's good and bad, right? It's look, for a small business owner, there is a rising tide lifts all ships attitude, and does it frustrate me when I go out in the market and people talk about Paso Robles, and I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. These people know about Paso Robles. There must be hopefully they're inspired by our region. They love the wines. And they go, yes, I drink Austin, Hope, Dow, and Justin. And you're like, cool, man. But you know what? They wouldn't know about Paso Robles if it wasn't for those wines.
Good point.
And so they have to, I remember long time someone told me there's two kinds of winemakers. There's two kinds of wine drinkers in the world. Those that admit they started on White Zinfandel, and those that don't.
Right.
So, but they're all the same.
Right.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. It is the challenge, I think, specifically in the world we live in today. We live in a more capitalistic society than we've ever lived in. And I'm a passionate winemaker and passionate business owner, and probably, I always say I'm frankly a pretty shitty capitalist. My capitalistic notions are not what drive what I do every day. And so I think when you get people that come to the area with big money, their notions are quite to the capitalistic side generally. And then you have a lot of, as Paso has gained popularity, you're seeing this happen in any quality wine region, Napa, Sonoma, certainly the Sonoma Coast. You see it a lot in Santa Barbara as well. As you see people coming in, Oregon's having it happen too. You have a lot of people with a lot of money that are coming in, and it becomes an ego project. There's an obsession with legacy, or there's an exception with financial return. And so that's a lot of those, as we know, as passionate wine people, a lot of those ideals are counter to. It's not that we can't make money, because we can't exist. We can't keep doing this. We can't bring these wines to the people if we can't make it viable economically. But at the same time, that's a challenge. And one of the challenges that brings is that as there's highly capitalistic notions, it forces a commoditization in a way of a product, because they look at the wine market and the lack of education and the fact that the American consumer wants a specific thing, right? And they want to, in wine it falls on a particular style. And so it happened with us, about 10 years ago. There was this big wave as Dow came in, and they were pushing. They shifted all this energy and momentum that had been created by great winemakers like Stefan Aseo and Justin Smith and Matt Trevisan, and these people that are driving Topless Creek, Neil Collins at Topless Creek, and the Perrin family, and Haas's, and driving towards Rhones, which is really a great fit for the region.
Right. The Rhone Rangers.
The Rhone Rangers. Yeah. I mean, you got to give some shouts to Randall Graham being a big part of that too. He was invested in he's been heavily, still is invested in the Central Coast, and driving that ship that direction. And then it just got totally, not derailed, but like the thunder got stolen.
It became Cabernet country.
Yeah, and it became Cabernet country. And so a lot of our great vineyards, I mean, there was a time not even 10 years ago, and we had a shortage of great Syrah, and all this Syrah had gotten torn out and replanted with Cab on sites that were shit for Cab. They were not. I mean, people just don't. There's a lack of understanding about what Cabernet needs, and they grow in such different sites. I mean, talk to anyone on the Rhone, and it's like you're gonna go grow Cabernet on a 40-degree slope on pure decomposing granite. Yeah, that's exactly what Cab wants.
Good luck.
Nope.
Yeah,
they're like planting it in deep, fertile, gravelly soils, without too much exposure. And so, they're planting Cabernet in terrible sites. Right. So then became this shortage, and now there's this big glut, and everyone's like, get rid of the Cabernet. Like, no one can sell Cabernet. And so that was a circumstance that came out of that investment that you speak of, that came, that new energy that came, probably some capitalistic notions, some commoditization of style and grape variety. And that was frustrating, because I think that the energy, what really brought a lot of attention to Paso Robles, I mean, maybe the original one was, the original Justin, like I saw, is what people still talk about. It's so funny how long a tail some of these things can have. The 1994, 1997 Justin Asasi's, okay, great, whatever. One wine got some mention back in the day. But then really the thing that pushed it to the next level was really the Rhones and these producers that were doing exciting things. And that's what created Paso as a region. And so as people got on board with that, and then it kind of just the attention got taken in a different direction so that a guy could make $1 billion and then exit the industry. It's like, great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Come in, hollow out the region, and then bounce. Yeah.
Like, thanks. So that is frustrating. I believe that we're on Patrobles. I kind of see as we're on sort of Patrobles 3.0, maybe almost 4.0 at this point.
Sure.
The early adopters, the Pizzenis, the Duceys, those people that came in and planted Zinfandel, the Martinelli family, those people that came in and planted Zin back in the early 1900s, 1920s, even late 1800s. York Mountain was up there. And then sort of the first big kind of commercial wave came in the end of the 90s when you had basically people looking at the market and planting what Napa was doing, meaning they planted Chardonnay, they planted Cabernet, they planted a lot of Merlot, and to a degree, a decent amount of Zinfandel. And then all those vineyards kind of gradually got torn out, and then we had this resurgence of Rhone, or there's not resurgence, but the first wave of true Rhone establishment as Topless Creek came in, other people started experimenting with things. Syrah, other Rhones took hold. That was a big move. Then it was kind of the shift to sort of a more consumerist sort of style, that of Cabernet, which is much, much bigger money. The people that invested in the early 2000s were people that were retiring with like $1 million, and they were like buying a property for $100,000 and planting 10 acres of vineyard, which is today where people are retiring and dropping 20 mil to start.
Right.
Very different approach. So, yeah, and now I don't know. We have a lot more recognition now than we did. It's nice to go into a wine shop and sit down with a buyer, and this is someone who's been in the industry for now more of my life than I haven't been in the industry, and it's certainly nice now to go into a place and open some Paso wines for someone and be like, oh, I love Paso. Oh, our customers love Paso.
Yeah.
They're very different than 20 years ago.
Right.
You walk in the door and it's like, I have never carried a Paso Robles wine.
Yeah.
So
why would I?
You're my first introduction.
Yeah.
And you can see that as an opportunity, but it's and I think that there's an envy now of some other regions. I think our neighbors to the south in Santa Barbara look at us and like, oh man, like Paso really got a foothold in the market. And there's some reasons for that. I mean, it's probably a little easier to, there's some big overripe, over-oaked, Paso Robles Cabernets that have really hooked consumers on a national level.
Right.
That's a little harder when you're making Santa Rita Hills Pinot.
Well, Pinot and Chard dominate the market. You grow a little bit of Syrah.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a way too, it's kind of like those bigger brands have become the gateway wine for the region.
We have to have
sense.
those.
Yeah. It's always something that I try to kind of like remind myself of.
Yeah.
I want to harken back to one of the things that you were talking about earlier in the podcast, and it was that detail of consumption. And it's something that I think it's something that I speak to a lot, right? Where intentionality and care has really taken over for the younger generation in regard to food, in regard to clothing, in regard to everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, wine is really the thing to me that relates the most truly with that identity, right?
Yeah.
Rainfall tracking, soil compositions, when it was picked. I mean, there's even regions in South Africa where they're doing integrity and sustainability stickers where they're tracking like that you're paying the pickers a responsible wage, right? And there's like so much care and attention that go into it. So I really want to highlight that from earlier in our conversation because I just think that that's like, I mean, you're right. There's nothing else out there. I mean, he said, I love Neiman Ranch. I was like, yeah, I like Neiman Ranch too. No fucking clue where it is. Not a clue.
Yep.
And he's actually not involved anymore. I saw that on an Instagram reel the other day. He sold it. He said some stuff like, I would never eat anything from my own ranch anymore. And I was like, wow, it's crazy, because you hear these names and you align them with integrity, or you partner them with the quality level, and then you stop asking the question. Yeah. Right, and you don't like ever check back in on it.
And that's the strength of brand building, right?
Right.
And that's the goal with anything.
Yeah.
I think it's in that's a kind of a good maybe a good segue, I guess. I mean, I don't mean to take the direction of the podcast, but you talk about that identity. To circle back, we come back to my other label, Akana. Yeah. And because that's a big part of that story. Is I mean I've been talking almost ad nauseum at this point about Petite Sirah, and so probably 80% of your Psalms have probably dropped off the podcast at this point.
Or you've captured them because nobody talks about Petite Sirah.
But the Akana project is all about the reason I started this project in 2012. So 2002 was for Aaron. Akana started in 2012. And the reason I started that was because it kind of goes back to that kind of taking the road less traveled idea, which is that I did want to make Pinot Noir because I love Pinot Noir, but I live on the coast. I live in a block from the ocean. It's where I grew up. And, as climate change has gone on, one of the things I've noticed, having already made wine in Paso at that point for over a decade, in dealing with a variety of different vintages, and living on the coast, it's like there's nothing I like better than leaving the winery, driving 35 minutes back to my house, and it's like, okay, it was 100 in Paso today, and it's 56 on the coast and foggy, and just seeing that moderation effect of the ocean. And so, I was up surfing in Cambria, and I was in the water, and I looked up on this hill, and I saw this vineyard, and I thought, there's no fucking way that's a vineyard. Like, no way. Like, that's an idiotic place to put a vineyard. Like, that's so close to the ocean. Like, no one would do that. And I thought, I think it is a vineyard. And then I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I can't imagine, like, that's going to work. And I was driving up, and then a couple weeks later, I was driving up this country road to Paso. I took this different direction than you normally take over Highway 46. I took a country road, and I passed another vineyard in Cambria up on a hillside. And I was like, what the hell? Like, someone's got a vineyard out here? Like, wow, this is fascinating. And I thought, man, these guys are like growing grapes like closer to the ocean. And there was a little vineyard outside of Cambria. So I went to high school in Cambria. And just up the road, I went to school with a couple of girls named the Prions, and their dad had planted this little vineyard up the road. And then he sold that property to a family called the Stolos. And then the Stolo then got acquired by Raj Par. So I grew up in this, going to high school, seeing this vineyard up the road, just a couple miles up from my high school in Cambria. And then a little bit farther up the road was another vineyard that I saw. And so I said, this is cool because this kind of fits in line with this sort of like attitude, like, I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. I'm already doing that with the Petite Sirah.
Right.
If I'm going to make Pinot, like, I want to make Pinot from somewhere that no one else is making Pinot from.
Right.
Like, the world does not need another goddamn Biennacido Pinot Noir, for the God's sake. And I literally had friends that were working for the Millers that were like, dude, I'll give you block Q, like best block, old vine, Martini clone, 73 planting. You want some of that? I'll get you some of that. I'm like, the world doesn't need more Biennacido Pinot Noir, man. There's like 74 single vineyard Pinot Noirs from Biennacido. I don't want to do that. That doesn't speak to me. That's not inspiring for the consumer. It's not inspiring for me.
Yeah.
And so I found these vineyards, one in San Simeon and one in Cambria. And then the guy that was farming the vineyard in Cambria was like, dude, I got this new vineyard in Pismo Beach. And I'm like, what? Pismo Beach? Because, yeah. I'm like, so I started this project to make wine that were all vineyards that were like stone's throw from the ocean, super close to the ocean. So the one in Pismo, Spanish Springs Vineyard, which I now make a good amount of wines from, 2 miles from the ocean. The one
That's where you're getting your Viognier from.
Viognier comes from Spanish Springs and Pismo. And I also make Pinot Noir. I make some Chardonnay. I make a little bit of Pinot Gris from there as well. And then the vineyard in San Simeon was Derbyshire. And so that vineyard was a mile and a half from the ocean. Just gets freaking annihilated by wind. Very cool site, though. Been making that since started buying that in 2013, actually. And then made it all the way up until the property sold this year and it got torn out. Yeah. It was pretty heartbreaking. Yeah. The highest yield we ever got was 1 ton an acre on a good year. Our average was around 500 to 700 pounds an acre.
Oh my God.
So it was on that extremity of really where you can farm, and it was never even not even remotely close to economical.
Sure.
I mean, you can't sell, coastal Pinot from at that time was not even an AVA for $10,000 a ton. It doesn't happen. But that's why that vineyard has made some great wines that are beautiful. So I started this Akana project. It originally was called Ikoria, but it was a very complicated Latin word. So Akana is my great-grandmother's name. My mother's from Hawaii. So my mom's born and raised in Hawaii, and my great-grandmother's name is Esther Akana. And so I named it Akana. And what this spurred in me doing originally it was aromatic whites. I wasn't making Chardonnay. I was just doing Pinot Gris and Viognier, and I used to do Riesling as well. So I don't make Riesling anymore, sadly, because I love Riesling. But it's a bit of a bear to sell, as any somm would agree.
Right in that same camp as Syrah.
Yep. And so I started Ikoria, or what was Ikoria, which is now Akana, making Pinot Noir from super coastal sites, closer to the ocean than most sites anywhere in California, really. And at that time, working with some of these growers, we started a grassroots movement I said, hey, we got to get an AVA going. Well, this is they're all San Luis Obispo County non-AVA wines. And so someone that was a heart and soul local and a true geology nut. I mean, I love geology. I nerd out on terroir so hard. So I decided to spearhead. I'm going to spearhead creating the SLO Coast, the San Luis Coast AVA. So I spent, a lot of people don't know that, but I was actually the one that created was the head of creating the SLO Coast, the San Luis Coast AVA. So I spent 8 years. I literally pulled out a Google map and drew the original boundary line. I'm like, I know exactly where the climate changes all on this coast because I drive it every single day.
Yeah.
I drive up and over the mountains from Paso.
Well, if you were going to school in Camarillo, you were driving through there every day to go to school.
I know where the fog intrusion is. I know where the wind breaks are. I know where all this climate changes and the nuances of it. I know where the soils are different. And so it was a really exciting project and definitely something that's been really inspiring to see. And then we had and now, talk about investment in, people coming to Paso Robles. We've had some newcomers that have come to the SLO Coast. You have the historic people like the Tallies in the Rio Grande Valley. They've been there forever. Mm-hmm. They've been making great wines for a long time. But we have newcomers like Raj Parj, was kind of a newcomer to the San Luis Obispo Coast. You have Mikey and Gina Juni, who have Scar the Sea wines, who are also newcomers to the SLO Coast.
Yep.
And they've just recently come into the area and started making wines from the area. They've been in the area for a long time, but they started making SLO Coast wines. And they purchased a vineyard as well. And those bring a new energy and excitement to an area that is historic. I mean, people have been growing vines there for a while, but now we have this kind of young blood of people that are influential, that are coming in and breathing life and energy into the SLO Coast. And it's been really, really exciting to see. And, I've got, about 15 years now making wines on the SLO Coast, and I've learned a lot. But it's another really, really exciting area that inspires me because it goes back to this concept of like knowing where your fruit comes from and this idea of growing grapes this close to the ocean with incredible moderation from the Pacific, where, with climate change, people are like, how was the vintage in Paso this year? It's like, oh, it was really hot, or last year was really, really cool. And it's like, you go to the coast and it's like, kind of the same as it was every year.
It's always cold.
It's kind of always the same. Yeah. So, so that's something that's been inspiring lately, and there's new things going on there. There's new producers that are coming into the fold that are doing some really interesting, sometimes a little esoteric, but cool things.
Yeah. I think that like those two names automatically are like, I'm like, wow, that's really exciting because those are people that are finding significant success. Well, the Scar the Sea brand, and then the Lady of Sunshine, I think, is
Gina's brand.
And then Raj obviously has an incredible following and is doing a lot of different things from Temecula all the way up. Yeah. So he was doing Haihu for a long time and stuff.
Yeah, they're doing cool things, and they're making some really cool wines, and they have a lot of cool inspirations. They've taught me some cool things about wine. I frankly don't know much about the Jura and don't like drink Jura wines, and they like love Jura. They're like, it's like everyone's like thing right now. Most of the Psalms that listen to this probably, or people that are in the wine trade that listen to this, probably all get a hard on for Jura too. Sure, it's interesting.
Sure. Yep.
It's cool. I've had some very cool and exciting and kind of cerebrally like eye-opening, maybe not eye-opening is the right word, but like cerebrally very interesting wines that are inspiring in their own ways. Also some plain disappointing wines, but you can say that about any region.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that takes us back to Petite Sirah in the sense of like, or even like the natural wine movement. There's a lot of really good stuff, and there's a lot of not so good stuff. Hey, don't put Petite Sirah
and compare it to natural wine movement, bro. Whoa.
I'm just saying.
That's a low shot.
If we don't have, if there's not enough examples, it's too hard to understand. I think from a consumer standpoint, it's too hard to understand like what is normal.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, though, what we talked about earlier in the podcast, where you have people, we talked about this sense of place, right? And the people behind it, the mission, the goals, and a lot of the people on the SLO Coast are really leaning into that more than anywhere, and that's what's really, really cool, because they are exemplifying that thing that I've harped on earlier. It's very important about why I think that we should be doing this, why I do what I do. And maybe in a sense, like the commercialism of Paso Robles as a contrast has taken us away from that. That being said, there's tons of winemakers that are in Paso that are doing amazing things. It's just that they get sort of smothered in the fact that these behemoths have now come to Paso Robles. And so this idea of Paso Robles is like, oh, well, Paso Robles is just this. And I probably a lot of people in the wine trade feel that way. They're like, oh, Paso Robles is this one-trick pony, just does this.
Sure. And I mean, I've done that in my head before, and it was one of the first regions I ever visited. I went to Paisinas, and I went to Donati Family Vineyard in 2009. And I remember really enjoying it. And then ever since, it seems like there was like a homogenization of style. But it was probably only on the brands that I was being exposed to
Yeah.
on the national level. Buying wine in Texas, you're exposed to, the bigger brands that Glazers is carrying,
Yeah.
which there was homogenization of style,
Yeah. And then when you have a new region like the SLO Coast is new, but the AVA as itself is new. And so because of that, people's first exposure to the SLO Coast is not with a commercially made over-oaked wine. It's going to be probably something that Mikey or Raj made, because those are more commercially available nationally, and they're getting pumped on social and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's their first exposure. So someone's first exposure to SLO Coast is cool, because I've had 3 SLO Coast wines and they were really cool.
Yeah.
Which is very different than if your first exposure to Pasos. I had 3 Paso wines, and it was J-Lore Cabernet, Austin Hope Cabernet, and and whatever in Dow.
Yeah.
And then it's like, then you're like, well, my connotation is just negative.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
So we have to like understand ourselves as people, and it's like our kind of where our biases form and come from. So anyway.
Yeah. And so, first of all, this is delicious and super bright and pretty and crunchy. And we tasted the Viognier and the Chardonnay earlier from Akana, and both of those wines really speak, I think, to the salinity factor. And when I think about Santa Barbara wines and I taste those, I always kind of like, if I was blind tasting, I would look for that salty kind of characteristic, and I get that in these as well, which is exciting because I don't really see that anywhere else in California.
We're just growing so damn close to the ocean. I mean, even Santa Rita Hills, love the wines down there. But, most of those vineyards are 10, 15, 16 miles from the ocean. They got a wind gap, so it's cool, But we have, both wind gaps and all the wind and the cold down, but we're just freaking close. I mean, the Chardonnay vineyard I poured you earlier, I can see the ocean from it. My block, I just look at the ocean. The Viognier, it's been at Pismo Beach, you can just see the ocean.
Yeah.
It's like it's not always like, 360-degree view.
Sure.
Sometimes there are peaks of the ocean, but it's like we got a good shot, and the proximity's there. And that's really where that moderation factor comes in, because once you get a certain, sometimes this happens in the Santa Rita Hills. Like if we get a heat wave in the late fall, we get some offshore winds.
Right.
And, I've talked to friends that are up in some of the coolest areas there, and like, oh, it's 102 degrees right now in Santa Rita Hills. I'm like, well, I'm in Pismo and it's 84.
Yeah.
So there's just this moderation that comes from the proximity,
The ocean serves as a bit of an insulator in that sense.
Yeah. And then we're, of course, sitting here drinking, talking about coastal climate, and we're sitting here drinking a Grenache-based wine from the west side of Paso, from the Willow Creek district, which is pretty big contrast.
Yeah, and Willow Creek district is where La Ventura is, I think, right? That's one of the wines that I also sold at Chambers that was really fascinating to understand just how different it was from Paso, because as a salesperson, there was always a little bit of an uphill sale selling Paso.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I have a Paso wine on my menu. What is it? It's my favorite neighbor.
Yeah.
It's Dow.
Yeah.
It's big brand XYZ.
Yeah.
Great. Well, you have that brand that people are going to recognize. And when they try to order that, wouldn't it be cool if you have something really unique and interesting to sell them as well?
Yeah.
Willow Creek is also, maybe I'm wrong, it's chalk. Is it Cameroonian soil? I think I remember.
No, it's not Cameroonian. It's all basically limestone and shale. It's all Miocene epoch, so it's going to be about 25 million years old in that zone. It's the same sort of geological period that did form a lot of like what you see in the Santa Rita Hills. It's very different. They have like diatomaceous earth. It's non-calcareous generally. Ours is highly calcareous. It is mostly pure limestone, and it's soft. Generally soft. Now there is limestone calcareous shales that are on the harder side, but different than like maybe when you go into some areas like out in like in Hollister and kind of that Pacinas area where you do have a lot of limestone out there, but some of those limestones are pretty hard. They can be more like, some of them are soft, but some of them are more like marble, more like metamorphosized, kind of intertwined with granite. Here we have a lot of really soft, super high pH, very difficult soils to grow in. But we're drinking a Grenache-based wine, and Grenache is, I remember talking to a grower one time, like, how do you grow Grenache? It's like, I try and kill it.
Yeah.
It's so vigorous and wants to yield so much,
napalm.
Right? So we can create these really dark, really dense, really powerful, but also still so bright and vibrant. I don't mean powerful in a negative way. I mean powerful in a cool way. It's an expression of Grenache that's like you have in Great Chateauneuf, pretty structured, pretty but still like structured.
When it also has, to me, like good Grenache can often have like a little bit of like a confectionery characteristic, like this candied vibe to it that this has. That's also really great.
Yeah,
it's also fascinating. You're growing Graciano here, and you're not shy with the Petite Sirah as well.
Yeah. This is a blend of Grenache Petite Sirah and Graciano. It's a bit of a hodgepodge, but I mean it's really supposed to be centered in Grenache. And, and what I love about Grenache is it's like I describe Grenache as like it's like the treble in a song. You know, it always jumps to the forefront.
Sure.
It's the lead singer in the front, even sometimes in small doses. You know, but it adds that brightness and that freshness. But it's just there's this drinkability and this juiciness, and obviously the acidity and the energy that it brings.
It'd be hard to pick that as a 15.5 wine. Also, I mean, it's much softer. I think it's
it's 15.5. Yeah,
15.5,
and that's Grenache's fault. You know,
right?
It loads up alcohol pretty much. And that's it's called Sand and Stone because I actually originally fell in love with Grenache. So I didn't mention this earlier, but after Cal Poly, I went on and did my master's in enology at the University of Adelaide in Australia.
Oh, cool.
So I lived in South Australia for 2 years and did my master's in winemaking down there. And that was a place where I really fell in love with Grenache, which was old vine Grenache in a place called Blewett Springs. So it's the high point of McLaren Vale. So all the way up in that around above 300 meters elevation. It's like ancient sand dunes, and these made these like super perfumed. I mean, this was pure white, literally white windblown beach sand over red clay. I mean, what a cool freaking place to be growing grapes. Old vines, 100-year-old Grenache, really inspiring wines. Totally different than a lot of the Aussie wines that I was drinking. Super cool Grenache. What a unique expression. Moved back after I finished grad school, and I was working at Saxum. And at Saxum, we were making Grenache in limestone. Right. And it was like, in that time, that was quote-unquote old vine Grenache. Planted in the late 80s, which is really not that old. But, like, it was old for Paso.
It's old for California.
Old for California. And it was like, holy shit, these Grenaches are insane.
Yeah.
They're tense, they're tannic, they're intense. There's density here. Super different than the sandy stuff that you're getting out of Blewett Springs in McLaren Vale, but these were, and that was just inspiring to me to say, like, wow, Grenache is such a global grape and underloved in my opinion. Yeah. So that was kind of the inspiration behind wanting to make Grenache, because I fell in love with Grenache on opposite ends of the world. Yeah. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. And again, trying to take something that has, in the opposite end of Petite Sirah, that doesn't have, let's say, global typicity. Yeah. Here you're trying to, by not being 100% Grenache, maybe you're also able to kind of give it a little bit more of that sense of place.
Absolutely. And kind of see like what Petite Sirah contributes to that, to what we all love about Grenache, and how does Petite Sirah play? Does it play nice with it? What does it contribute? How does it impact the wine? It tends to take that kind of, that red fruit profile, that brightness, that strawberry, that cherry that we love. You add a little bit more black fruit to it, and kind of I always get this kind of a lullaberry. Kind of harkens back to growing up in Cambria, where like the Lynn family grew a lullaberry pie. It makes a lullaberry pies and grew lullaberries. And I always get this kind of cool lullaberry kind of characteristics, this wild berry kind of thing that it brings to the spectrum. They're super different, and I love how it always brings that nuance to it.
Mm-hmm. And here we are to the star of the show.
Yeah, so this is the Petite Sirah. This is actually kind of a fun contrast, because we have the 02 here, which I.
The 22.
The 22 that I pretty much sold out of, and we're pouring 23 now. But this is cool because we have a pretty big contrast in vintages. We have a 24 Pinot that we tried. You tried a 25 Viognier earlier. Right. 23 for the Sand and Stone, which is a pretty iconic, awesome vintage in Paso, and then 22, which is a very, very hot vintage in Paso. And 25 Curious, this is probably one of the hottest vintages in my career. And so in a lot of ways, it's like you'd expect, like, a 2022 Petite Sirah has pretty thin skins. A lot of people always think that Petite Sirah has thick skins, which it does not. It has sort of moderate to oftentimes thin skins, so it's prone, much like Graciano and other varieties, to raisin in hot climates, which is why sometimes you try Lodi Petite and it's raisiny. It's because the variety will legitimately raisin. Right. And it's obviously very dark. And so, but here's a wine from 22 from a very warm vintage that I don't think has a lot of the good rich qualities and the good fruit, but it has a lot of savory notes as well, and doesn't come off as showing as a hot vintage at all, I think.
No, I mean, I think like when I would think about Petite Sirah before, I would think about like dense, unctual. I mean, and this is a dense wine, but it's not like cloying richness, right? It's not sweet. It has lift. It has polish. It has like a vibrancy to it that's really great. So to consider that it's Petite Sirah, I wouldn't have expected it to drink this way, because again, maybe I just don't try enough examples these days. And then to know that it's a hot vintage also is really fascinating, because it feels so, I don't know, lively. There's so much vitality to it.
Yeah, I think that people always say to me, like, wow, your wines your Petite Sirahs are elegant, which
Right.
I think I used to take that as like a dig in a way, like,
Sure.
oh, it's elegant, but like it's not elegant in a way that they're not saying it's not it's not a rich wine, you know, but it's, you know, there's a lot of effort on my side of the farming and the growing to make sure that we're not overcropping, that we're, you know, dry farming as much as possible, that we're picking. There's actually, believe it or not, there's a realm of picking Petite Sirah too early. It does have a lot of tannin that does need to polymerize on the vine and mature. Otherwise, you're going to get a pretty gnarly wine.
Right.
A really pretty unpleasant wine. So there's a ripeness threshold, so
Sure.
to speak, in Petite Sirah, and it has a lot less to do with sugar and more to do with polishing tannin on the vine. And but yeah, it's there's a lot of work we do, and in Paso we have so much acid. You know, we have all these limestone soils. And again, I was mentioning earlier, you don't want to grow Petite on a super steep, pure white hillside of solid limestone. You're going to end up with making raisin juice. It's going to be super pruny. It's going to have crazy acid and crazy color, and a really very little tannin actually. You need to have it on it. Petite Sirah likes a little dirt. It
Right.
wants to have some soil. It doesn't necessarily want to be grown on a riverbed in Dry Creek Valley.
Right.
But it wants to have, in a way, maybe to a degree, a little bit like Cabernet. I think some of these high tannin varieties, excuse me, some of these high tannin varieties, we think that, like, a lot of those varieties like dirt. Cabernet likes to be on somewhat fertile soil.
Right.
You know, Petit Verdot, some of these other varieties, they don't want to grow on the most extreme of all sites. I think Petite Sirah, you don't want to grow it on way too fertile soil because it will crop really heavy, and it's a little bit hard a beast to manage. But I do think it needs to have the right amount of stress, kind of like any variety. And so I've made wines from these super crazy sites that I love for certain varieties like Grenache, and they're terrible for Petite Sirah. So it's about growing it on the right sites and creating this level of, you want enough limestone to give you that great acidity to really make the wine have, you know, drinkability and balance. And then you really need to make sure that you're polishing the tannins. And you end up with a wine like this, which I think is a really complete wine. It's rich. It's got great texture. It's got great florality to it. It's got all the good savory notes that we want in Petite, because it can be quite savory. That's part of its Syrah parentage. It can be super black peppery, get in the meaty spectrum without the volume going to 11.
Right.
But still has good energy and good freshness.
Yeah.
And so you end up with like what I like to call, I think the big challenge in Petite Sirah is to make it what I would call a complete wine out of it. Great entry, great mid palate, great long finish, enough tension, enough tannin there that supports the wine, but not something that's overwhelming. Has obviously nice polished acid and has a reasonable spectrum of flavor profile in the sort of savory with the fruit. And I think we can get all that with this variety. And I think, you know, Cabernet doesn't always deliver that either.
Sure.
You know, it takes a lot to nuance it to give you all those things too.
That always blend a lot of stuff into it.
Yep.
Yeah.
For that reason.
What's your very quick layup pairing for this wine, for Petite Sirah?
Ooh, man, that's a tough call. And the reason being is that I don't like to throw out, I think there's a little bit too much emphasis on throwing out the generics with Petite.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of someone saying Petite Sirah barbecue, Petite Sirah barbecue,
Right.
Petite Sirah barbecue. It sounds like we're on a Joe Rogan podcast. It's like eat meat and drink Petite Sirah, you know, so your T levels will go up. But I for me, I always like to push people in the direction of, like, you know, do something that, think in the realm of rather than just the ingredient itself, think about the other elements of it. You know, think about bringing spices into the realm. You know, I think taking duck and putting like a Moroccan spice or something like that on it.
Yeah.
You know, don't go too sweet. Don't be like, oh, I'm gonna do a Petite Sirah and I'm gonna put like a reduced plum sauce on it. It's like what are we
It
doing?
already has lots of fruit.
Yeah, it's already got lots of fruit. Like let's place something that's gonna be not contrast, but like complementary in a different direction.
I was thinking like, you know, the Chinese pork belly dumparo. I was thinking like that, like the braised pork belly with all the herbs, with all the like spices, like cinnamon and clove and stuff.
I totally think the cinnamon and clove spectrum, I love that kind of Moroccan spice. Even some of the Lebanese spices are really, really good. I think you can kind of lean in a little bit there. I mean, people tend to want to go Korean because Korean can kind of get a little bit on the sweet side.
Sure.
You know, you don't want to go. I think you don't want to go too sweet. You certainly don't want to go too spicy.
Right.
It's a big wine.
Yeah,
you know, it's
for sure.
a rich wine. You don't want to go too heavy. But I always venture to push people a little bit in that spectrum of like, yeah, give it some fat and protein.
Right.
You know, I mean, this wine doesn't have such huge tannins that like you have to cut them with. You need the protein, the proteins in your mouth to cut it because it's already pretty polished in the glass. Yeah. But definitely the proteins help. Like lean in a little bit more different in the spice spectrum.
For sure.
It's more fun anyway.
Yeah.
And that's the way I like to eat.
Yeah. Okay. It's time. What piece of advice do you have for listeners? Is there a statement you'd like to make? What's your closing statement?
I mean, absolutely. I think if I'm going to make a statement on this podcast to someone a podcast that's probably listened to by a lot of industry professionals, I can't. It's going to sound really cliche, but I can't come on here and not say, don't turn your back on Petite Sirah. I think that it's something that the story of Petite Sirah as a varietal, as a fabric of this industry in the United States, specifically California, I think that there's a lot, and I think there's something to be said there, and it's something that leans in and it pulls on the heartstrings of exactly what great industry people and great somms in the U.S. are inspired by, which is history,
mm-hmm.
it's creativity. It's trying to find. We're all inspired by wine because we're constantly trying to find new frontiers in wine. We're constantly going like, what's the new thing I haven't tried? What's the new thing that's like going to be? I'm not saying that Petite Sirah is going to be the aha moment for somms out there, but I think that there's a lot. There's a lot of depth there, and there's a lot of more to explore,
mm-hmm.
and that's been what's been inspiring me for the last 2.5 decades of making wine. And so I think that more people in the industry need to lean on that. It inspires me that some people are doing that a little bit with Zinfandel, even though it's not my favorite variety in the world. But I think there's interest there, and I think Petite Sirah is totally part of that conversation.
It's great. Love it. Well said.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.